First matchup on the docket, which was supposed to be a barn burner, right? We got Eryk, your boy Anders, versus Darren, the dentist Stewart. And I'll tell you what, man, we haven't seen these dudes fight in a little bit of time, respectively, on both ends. But they came out, and I was surprised, man, because Eryk Anders looked like the best Eryk Anders that I have ever seen. And Darren Stewart, the narrative was that he couldn't really train because in Europe they got these crazy COVID restrictions and whatnot. So what did he have to do instead? He had to go train at like the park and like do pull-ups on, you know what I mean, like random things in the park, and do push-ups on park benches and things of that nature. So I mean, excuses aside, man, what stood out to you in that bout before the no contest took place?
Man, what stood out to me was Andrew's athleticism. He
Sure.
really showed the fact that he's been there for years doing, moving around, bouncing around, doing all this stuff. And that was like the most impressive factor to me. And for the dentist only training, old Rocky style, straight hobo at the park, doing pull-ups and stuff, he actually looked really good. It didn't seem like he had ring rust or anything, but man, what stood out to me most was Eryk Anders' athleticism. What about you?
Well, I will say Eryk Anders looked like and they said it on the broadcast too, he looked like a 205er. He looked like he was a light heavyweight fighting that middleweight, man. The dude is huge. I've been listening to a bunch of pre-fight interviews that he was doing, and he had said himself, he was like, this is the best shape I've been in my entire life. My last fight was not a representation of how I actually fight. And yeah, man, dude was ready. Now, here's the thing, man. I felt Darren Stewart was a little relaxed, which is very good. You know what I mean? No pressure, but it felt a little too relaxed. And he was doing a bunch of that flowy Israel Adesanya type stuff. And while that's like totally cool, man, he got pieced up because of it. And I think that I think personally, this is my thoughts. I don't think he was taking Eryk Anders as serious as maybe he should have, because nonetheless, regardless if you don't think that Eryk Anders is the most technical MMA fighter, which he's not, if you don't think he's the greatest MMA fighter, which he's not, he's a tough outing each and every single time. Like, you're not just getting him out of there. Like, it's going to be a dogfight. And that's the one thing I talked about, right? He could make it a dogfight, which is what he did, and had the dentist on shaky legs, man. So ultimately, the fight was very, very short. We didn't get into the second round, right? I think that knee was like right at the end of the first round. So only one round worth of action, but let's talk about the no contest, man. So we just talked about this, dude. This is why it's amazing. This is why I was screaming on my couch when I saw this, is because we just talked about Peter Yan losing via disqualification because he knees Aljamain Sterling in the head. Now we had a little more of is the hand down? Are the knees down? What was really going on? And this one, it was much more clear, man. Darren Stewart was just on like hands and knees, and Anders just threw that knee in there, and it was super illegal. But you had pointed out, and I didn't see this, you pointed out that he almost Anders almost hit Darren Stewart with an illegal knee earlier in the fight. Tell me about that.
Like 30 seconds, maybe like 45 seconds before, when he was still hurt on the ground, he threw a knee, and it either caught him in the chest. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. It either caught him in the chest or just missed. And he was still on the ground, still illegal. And then like I even screamed at that point. I was like, oh no, not another illegal knee. And it missed. So I was like, oh, okay, cool, thank God. 30 seconds later, you see him do it again, and I literally saw him posture up and throw the knee. I was like, oh my God, like you had your chance. You can't get lucky twice, man. You have to watch it back, because it was crazy to me how they were saying that they're measuring intent. One of the stipulations of making a no contest was the intent of Anders. Like, how do you gauge intent when he threw the shot 30 seconds before?
100%, 100%. And that's kind of the crazy thing, right? Because when we're relating it back to Piotr Yan, we're saying this is a middleweight fight that these aren't even two ranked dudes. So this is more or less, don't get me wrong, I don't want to be like hating or whatever. This is kind of a meaningless contest, you know what I mean? As opposed to a championship bout, you know what I'm saying? So how does this one get ruled the no contest, and the championship bout, a belt changes hands simply because, we got to call it a DQ, right? It's been, and that's what's really confusing, man. So I agree with you. I think that like Dana White said, when he was asked if Piotr Yan threw an intentional knee, he was like, he didn't slip and fall into the dude. Like, he threw the knee. Same thing for Anders. He threw the knee. And Anders, even though he was super apologetic, was like, dude, that's the last thing I want to do is cost the fans a fight, cost us some money, do all that. So, like, maybe he was like, I wasn't trying to take your head off with the thing, but I made a mistake. But nonetheless, you did it, and we have to hold these people accountable for their actions. So, in my opinion, I think that we should have just keep it consistent, right? I think that that's the name of the game when we're talking about this gray area, which we'll hit on a little bit later in the show, but let's keep it consistent. You called it a DQ for Yan, call it a DQ for Anders, you know what I mean? And we got more nonsense along the way that we'll hit up, a little bit later in terms of, inconsistencies and whatnot. But Eryk Anders, I think the big thing we got to take out of this is he looked really, really, really good. And if that fight didn't end up the way that he did, and if I think Herb Dean was reffing that, I think Herb Dean, he's been a little Mario Yamasaki, or yeah, is that Mario? Is that his name? Anyways, he's been a little just bleed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that he could have waved that fight off. I mean, am I wrong? Was Darren Stewart, was he basically out of there? That was the writing on the wall, right?
Oh, he was out. In fact, if Anders would have just landed the knee to the body, I think that would have been the beginning of, or more so the beginning to the end. That would have been the door closing on the final nail in the casket. But what I wanted to talk about was, I actually liked how Herb Dean did let it go a little long, and in a couple of his last fights, he has let it go, let people actually die on their shield, as the saying goes. But what I liked is he actually let the doctor make the decision, instead of in the Yan fight where it was kind of up in the air. They were asking Funky M, Aljo Sterling, that like, what do you want to do? They were putting it on the fighter, which is a hard thing, man. Every fighter, you think, I want to keep going. You don't want to look like, soft in front of the entire MMA fandom. But I like what Herb Dean did, where he asked the ref, like, hey, make a decision, man. And the ref made him walk forward like they would in boxing, tap off the gloves and all that. And he saw that. He was like, no way. So he put the responsibility where it should be, in the medical professional who's there to protect the fighters, instead of let ego get in the way and let Mario Yamasaki Jr. step in.
Well, let me hit you with a rebuttal then, right? Because I was just listening to the weigh-in podcast with, I talk about it all the time, Big John McCarthy and Josh Thompson. And Josh Thompson, who was a former, I think he was a Strikeforce and UFC fighter, right? He actually said the opposite. He was all like, the last thing that we need to do is let the doctors decide the fight. Let the doctor decide if I'm going to walk away with my win bonus or not. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we already say, don't leave it to the judges. If you could go, you should go. That's basically what they're saying. Now, my opinion on that is that there needs to be one definitive, I think so, like a referee, he can stop the fight without the doctor coming in. You know what I mean? Like, he can. It's not by their guidelines, by refereeing guidelines and certain commissions guidelines, that's not like the status quo. That's not the procedure that you're supposed to follow, but you can still do it, right? Now, my thing is for the doctor to have Darren Stewart walk forward, and Darren Stewart walked forward pretty fine. You know what I mean? You could tell dude was a little on shaky legs or whatnot, but dude looked fine, right? And doctor says, nah, you know what I mean? He's done. How about Herb Dean just says, come on, bro. I've seen so many fights. You're done. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I don't know if it should be on just the ref. I don't know if it should be on just the doctor. I don't know if it should be mutually between the both. But I do know that the UFC or these athletic commissions, they need to have better protocol. You know what I mean? Because you can make Herb Dean look bad, or referees look bad, or you can make the doctor look really bad in these respective, situations. But nonetheless, man, I do agree. I think that fighters oftentimes, right, they're gonna go out with their ego, and they're gonna say, oh, I'm gonna fight, and they're gonna have further brain damage or whatever the case may be. And it's really tough because we just saw how Aljamain Sterling is being treated after not literally taking a fat knee to the head. It's like, I don't know, it's a lose-lose in this situation. But I think it's definitely interesting, and I think this is one of the many examples that's going to help us shape the sport as we go further. We need to remember this sport is still in its infancy. Like, we haven't been doing this thing for 100 years or whatever the case may be. If anything, this is we just passed like 25 years. It's not even 30 years old of a sport in the UFC. But